All right. Well, welcome again to another one of our level-headed marketing sessions. Today we have the honor, the pleasure, and may I add, thrilled pink on my end to have Amy Vernon, also known or used to be known as the Bacon Queen, but we'll get into that later. But Amy Vernon is actually, if you don't know who Amy Vernon is, you've probably been living under a rock. But she was one of the top 15 submitters of Dig.com, the highest ranked female ever. You're probably either following her or have seen her retweeted on Twitter. She's huge on Facebook. She's been interviewed by the New York Times, Forbes, Venture Beat, and other publications. And so, Amy Vernon, hello. And of course, my co-host and cohort, Doc Sheldon. So, welcome, Amy, and here we go. So today what we're going to discuss is community building, because if anybody knows anything about community building, it's Amy. I'm not going to take up too much time blah, blah, blahing. Doc, please kick me under the table when I do.
Okay.
But Amy, tell us a little bit about your background and what has made you who you are today.
As you mentioned, I spent a little bit of time on Dig, and at the time I was working for a newspaper and was metro editor and was just trying to find other ways of getting traffic to the newspaper and really working on blogs on the paper and just trying to get eyeballs on the website. And I happened upon Dig through one of the communities on one of the blogs that I was writing on, and just was determined to figure it out. And I did, with the help of some other friends who were also trying to figure it out at the time. And before I knew it, I was completely addicted to the front pages, because at the time it was very exciting. I mean, especially after your first one, you know, you're just like, is that a fluke?
Right.
And really, that was really my start in online. I mean, like I said, I was working on blogs and had been on committees on the newspaper, which anybody who's familiar at all with newspaper committees is probably rolling their eyes so far they're in the back of their heads. On our online website.
Not to interrupt, but to interrupt. Give me a time frame. What are we talking about? 2001, 2002?
This was 2000. Well, I was laid off in 2008. I really started doing this stuff in 2006, 2007 was when I started getting into, you know, blog catalog and my blog log, and then later Dig and you know, all of these things. But 2008 was where I completely made the transition, because that's when I was laid off.
Right, right. So your background, you're a journalist. I mean, that was
hardcore. Ink and paper, 20 years. That's all I had ever wanted to be.
Right, right. And so transitioning into online, you've realized, hey, look, I can build a community the same way newspapers have built their community. Or was it something else? Was it Dig that got into your system, or did it a light bulb just spark and say, I need to build a community because it's going to matter?
Really what happened initially was on Dig there was a small group of us who were friends, and there were lots of small groups of people who were all kind of trying to figure stuff out together, and eventually all of those groups, you know, people got to know each other, and those groups became larger groups. And there really was, what a lot of people don't realize is there was an amazing community of users on Dig, and that included both people who were very heavy submitters and people who didn't submit at all, but just were, you know, among those who commented and voted on stories. And that was my first real experience with community, because in newspapers, you were covering communities, but you were never trying to like be part of a community. And so, you know, with Dig, you know, we all sort of built this large community, and when Dig started imploding, we were all already sort of in different places. Some people had gone heavy into Twitter, some people had moved over to Reddit, some people weren't really doing social but were blogging a lot or were working in marketing. A lot of people who were there in Dig weren't really in any industry when they first started on Dig, but their marketing careers were more or less launched because they figured that out and they were able to leverage that into something else, which really is what happened to me, because I never, I still say, I mean, I have no idea. People like rattle off marketing terms and, you know, I have no idea what they're talking about. I'm like, I don't know. I know how to do it. I just don't know how to talk about it.
Right, which is something and a great accomplishment. You know, you're invited to speak at different conferences. You're invited to you know, build communities for different companies. You're hired on now as a independent. So, and I know that a lot of people would love to you know, to be able to do this, but it does take time, and that's what a lot of people don't understand. I mean, that's why I wanted a little timeline. You know, when did you actually start, and today where you are, which is huge. I mean,
well, you know, I mean, with Dig, like I had a Dig account for a year before I hit the front page on Dig.
Wow.
I was using it heavily probably for about 6 months before that finally happened. And, you know, I mean, that's what, and then, of course, when it did, and my newspaper saw the traffic, they're like, oh, write up an SOP, and we'll get everybody on Dig. And I was like, here's your SOP. Work your ass off for 6 months and become part of the community. And then, boom, it'll be good.
Yeah.
You know, there was no SOP to write. I had to lean over and ask someone. I was like, what's an SOP?
Well, for our listeners, what is an SOP?
It is a standard operating procedure.
There you go.
I know that acronym. But yeah, so, you know, and that really is one of the things. I remember being really frustrated early on that, you know, I saw other people who frankly had been in marketing longer, and so they were already in the field, who were maybe not as knowledgeable on certain social things, but were getting very big because they were already in the industry. So they were learning, and they were working hard to learn the platforms and how it all worked into there. And I realized that, okay, maybe I knew a lot in terms of these platforms, but I needed to really build my own profile. And I was lucky. I happened to start all my profiles with my name just because I was really just not creative.
Well, that's, you know, not to put words in your mouth. Not to put words in your mouth, but that's something that I found is very successful with women like you. You're transparent. There's no need to use fancy words. You know, you don't know some of the terminology. It just comes natural for you. And I think that's where a lot of, or the difference, I should say, between people that are successful and people that try really hard. It's almost like second nature for you. Not to say that you don't work towards, you know, getting the different goals that you want to get, but you're natural about it. And I think even back when you started, using your own name was just, it was common sense. You know, you didn't try to quote unquote brand yourself, even though that in itself has branded you. So
in the early times of people talking about personal branding, and it's kind of funny to think of anything that was like 4 or 5 years ago as early times, but you know, whatever. People were like, "Oh, you were so smart to use your name," and I was like, "Yeah, I was, wasn't I?" And but you know, sometimes it's better to be lucky than smart, you know. But the thing is, look, I'm a New Yorker. My dad's from the East End of London. My mom's from Brooklyn. I've gotten in trouble many times because I have trouble not speaking my mind. I try to be polite about it, but if something comes to mind, I just say it. And you know, it's gotten me in trouble in the past in corporate environments where that was not especially encouraged. But Jack's like, yeah. But in this new world or whatever it is that wherever we are, it works, and it doesn't work for everybody, and that's fine because if we all liked each other, then the world would be kind of boring.
Right, true. And I've always said that, there's going to be people that just don't like you. Get over it and move on. Because, we're up to, what's the world population? 6 billion, I think, or?
Yeah, 6 or 7. Yeah.
6 or 7 billion.
6.3, I believe.
Yeah, so, if 10 people don't like you or whatever, 100 people, whatever, you move on. And I think that comes from, being confident, smart, innovative, a visionary, if you will, which brings me to my next question. One of the things that I noticed on your blog is that you do, or when you do conferences or when you speak, as a matter of fact, you have an upcoming conference, the Women 2.0, and it looks like you're going to be talking about competition and mentorship. Not to give anything away.
Look, you know what? Actually, I'm not speaking at Women 2.0 this year. My speaking page is so out of date. It's horrible.
Okay, but you have spoken about it. Okay.
Yes, I was actually a mentor at the Women 2.0 pitch conference when they were here last year in New York, and I'm also a mentor for the Women Innovate Mobile Accelerator Network. They're an accelerator and also a network. There are a couple of things, and I as a forthright feminist, I sort of feel like I've encountered many women who I admired what they did in the newsroom, and they were really not good mentors and not good at helping other women coming up, really climb the ladder, but not, just in understanding even how to climb the ladder. I never asked for a hand up, but just like, how did you do this? How did you get through all of this? Because newspapers, the whole news industry has been as misogynist as pretty much anything else.
I had a close friend who worked, she sat on the board of a few decent-sized corporations that had 35 years working her way up. And we had a conversation one time where she said that, you can't find, as a woman, you can't find a female mentor because the prevalent attitude is, hey, I had to figure it out. Quit whining and go figure it out yourself. Don't come to me for help, And she says that, she ran into that so many times, and she was an active mentor to other women, but because of that, because there was such a dearth of support.
And I think some of it is a generational thing because there was the generation where they were the only women working their way up in whatever industry and whatever company, and no one helped them, and I have a lot of respect and admiration for that, but I feel like now there's the generation of people probably ranging from about 10 years older than me to and down. I'm 44, so in their 50s on down, where there's more of a feeling of okay, it was tough to get here, but it's not impossible, and if we're even just a sounding board and saying, oh yeah, that happened to me and this is how I dealt with it, or even, oh yeah, that happened to me. Not even saying how to deal with it, but just knowing that there were other people who experienced the same thing, right. And knowing that they made it through. So okay, great. Now I actually know somebody who experienced that.
Right.
And I feel like I don't feel like I'm a very good mentor in terms of on a daily basis or a weekly basis being like, oh hey, checking in and touching base and blah blah blah. But I'm really good at if someone needs to, talk through something and say, what's going on, that's the kind of mentor I am. And I'm very aware of my limitations, and that goes back to the whole thing of not pretending to be something I'm not. I'm never going to be that mentor who sets up scheduled lunch dates for 3 months out, and because I can barely schedule my own. Well, Gabriella knows all about my scheduling capabilities, such as they are.
It got to the point. I'm not going to give too much away, but it got to the point. Anytime Amy would send me a message, I would wait for that second message because I knew it was coming. Sometimes it would happen within 3 minutes, but usually it happened under the 10-minute mark. There was always that second message of whoops, wrong link, or whoops, wrong name, or oops, don't, whatever. So yeah, I think it's called
and in community
multitasking.
Building, yes, and also when you're building a community, I think that's the most important thing is setting expectations.